Our Family, which is a church membership devotional guide. Michael and his wife Carrie have three children. They live in Versailles, Kentucky. So, Michael, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about the Cooperative Program, its history, and its importance. But first, let's tell us a little bit more about you. How did you come to faith in Christ, and how did a call to ministry come to you?
Well, I love sharing about that. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, a dairy farmer knocked on my door and invited my brother and I to go to church. She was down the road from my house, lived across the street from my cousins. And when she found out we had moved into community, she took us to church. My parents were both Christians, but we had yet to find a church, and were not attending anything anywhere regularly. But that started a snowball effect. My parents became very involved. At age 11, I became a believer. At age 13, I went to Camp Raybro, one of our, back in the day, Kentucky Baptist Convention camp. And when I got home from Camp Raybro, this amazing thing, I'd heard preaching like I'd never heard before, and I started to emulate it in my bedroom and kind of the stillness of the quiet time. And I just became enthralled, but I never thought I had such a high regard for being a pastor or a minister. I never thought that could be me. But at the age of 15, I felt like the Lord was calling me to do that. And the little church I grew up in gave me the chance to start preaching. And so occasionally, 2 or 3 times a year as a teenager, I'd get the chance to preach at my home church. I started teaching RAs at my home church and went off to college after that. You know, when I went to college, I did not know that you could be a full-time minister. Every minister I'd ever known was a bivocational minister. And I discovered when I went to college that maybe the Lord was calling me to make this my primary vocation. And I'm so thankful that he did.
What a great story, Michael. And I thank God for that church that gave you opportunity to preach, and then to recognize some gifts in you, making it easier for you to answer the call. That's what a great legacy they have that's being lived out not only through all their ministry but also through your life. Michael, part of your role here at the KBC is to inform and educate Kentucky Baptists about the Cooperative Program. So let's start with the basics. Tell us what the Cooperative Program, or CP as we may refer to it in our time together. Tell us what it is, and how it even had its early beginning right here in Kentucky.
Yeah, well, early on, Baptist cooperation existed apart from the Cooperative Program. We were funding seminaries and we were doing things, but we found it very difficult. In fact, several of our entities were in ginormous debt, and churches were finding this societal approach of funding ministry was laborious. As week in, week out, they would have a different person come to the church and ask for a special offering, and it became a lot for churches. Here in the state of Kentucky at First Baptist Church Murray, when H. Boyce Taylor became pastor, he started a unified giving plan. The church used a subscription model of giving like many other churches did up until that point. But he set a box in the church foyer and asked people to give generously, and they would pay for all the expenses of the church out of that giving. And so during COVID, a lot of churches thought that they came up with a new way of giving to the offering box. Well, H. Boyce Taylor had actually used that back 100 years before that. Well, he became part of the leadership of Kentucky Baptist Convention, chairing what would be our finance committee. In 1914 and 15, he traveled the state promoting a cooperative giving model within the state of Kentucky. And Kentucky Baptists adopted that in 1915 as the model for our state convention. And then 10 years later, the Southern Baptist Convention saw what was happening in Kentucky, realized the power of this cooperative model, and voted in Memphis, Tennessee that year to adopt a new giving plan that they renamed the Cooperative Program, which had its roots in Kentucky and more specifically at First Baptist Church of Murray.
In fact, there's a historic landmarker sign at Murray First Baptist that stands today. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's great. I was sharing with a group of people that the idea of the Cooperative Program started in Kentucky, and I think they did not believe me until I could show them the historical marker. So that certainly gives some credence to that. And it's just a recognized spot to say that this is where the greatest funding model for missions and ministry has come from, right here. If you go to First Baptist Murray, they have an historical room where you can see some of the artifacts from those early days. And get this, since First Baptist Murray's idea was launched, Baptists have given nearly $20 billion
Incredible.
to support ministry through the Cooperative Program.
Absolutely incredible. And who would have thought? But you know, Southern Baptists, with all of our flaws, and we have plenty, but we're at our best when we're working together and recognizing something that God is doing. And the Lord was obviously at work at First Baptist Murray. And that idea of a unified giving plan that would fund ministry and missions in ways, Michael, that only heaven's going to tell the full impact of what the Lord has done through that giving. So you served as a local pastor. You had a great ministry at Versailles Baptist, transitioned out of there to come to work with your State Convention Mission Board staff. How did your background as a church pastor fuel your passion for the Cooperative Program?
Yeah. If I can go back just a little bit before, I love the Cooperative Program even before I became a pastor. I grew up with RAs and going to Baptist-funded camps and went to a Kentucky Baptist supported college, got a seminary degree at a Cooperative Program supported seminary, served with IMB missionaries who were supported by a Cooperative Program. So I already had a heightened view of Cooperative Program when I came to be pastor. And I inherited a church that was already sold out for the Cooperative Program. Versailles Baptist gives 11% of their undesignated receipts to the Cooperative Program, the idea that we're going to give over and above a tithe to support our missionaries around the world. And so I learned a lot from them. And the daunting thing about being a pastor is this: if we look at Acts 1:8 and this charge to Christians and charge to the church, it's a daunting task to think that we're to reach Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And how in the world would our church in Central Kentucky be able to do that? Well, the only way we can do that is by working with other churches. And so it became both a scriptural mandate, I felt like, and a strategic decision that cooperating through Cooperative Program is the best way. It just makes sense as a funding model that we're going to support one another as we collectively send missionaries around the world.
Michael, what a great background you had already coming in, and your appreciation for Southern Baptist's primary approach to funding ministry and missions through the Cooperative Program. A lot of pastors have not had your experience. They may not have grown up in a Southern Baptist church, or they may have grown up in a church that just doesn't talk much about CP. How do you help a pastor better understand what CP is and understand the value of it so that they may embrace it the way that you have as a leader?
Yeah, there's several things. One is, when I was pastor, we had some people come forward to become IMB missionaries. I had a couple go to Turkey. We had someone go to Nepal. And if we were not part of the Southern Baptist Convention, I'm not sure how we could have fulfilled that and helped them with that calling. And so this ecosystem that exists within Southern Baptist Convention helps local churches be able to send people to the mission field without having to carry the full weight of that on their own at the church. I was once meeting with a pastor who shared with me that he was once a independent Baptist missionary in Alaska. And there's some incredible independent missionaries. This is not a disregard for that, but he shared that the reason he came home was because he just couldn't raise enough support through the years. And the wonderful thing about Southern Baptist is we have this staying power of our missionaries on the field. There was a survey done of missionaries several years ago that found that 43% of independent missionaries leave the field within the first 5 years. But only 7% of Southern Baptist IMB missionaries are not able to fulfill their term. And it's never because of finances. It's usually because of health, the reason they cannot do that. And so when you support missionaries and missions through the Cooperative Program, you are much more likely to have that work continue on than you were if you were to support that independently. Also, there's this chance for a strategic and singular priority in their ministry. I was talking to an independent missionary who said he spent about 25 to 30% of his time raising money on the field. You know, just because you're a great missionary doesn't mean you're going to be a great fundraiser. There's some incredible missionaries that find it difficult to raise funds. Well, our missionaries are not assigned with that task, which gives them the opportunity to share the gospel. And that's why last year IMB saw over 728,000 gospel conversations that led to over 102,000 baptisms internationally. So you've got staying power. You've got this singular focus on sharing the gospel in those places.
Yeah, well, very, very persuasive and encouraging. And think about the cost of getting a missionary on the field. I can't imagine what it costs today. Probably $250,000 or more to get a missionary family, language school, everything they have to go through. And you want them to stay. You want them to be able to stay. And there are certainly reasons a couple may have to come home, possibly family, possibly health and sickness. But it's great that money doesn't have to be that reason. And so for Southern Baptist and Kentucky Baptist, CP allows us to hold the ropes for those folks who are doing the work in some of the toughest places. So, Michael, anything that's been around as long as the Cooperative Program and that has been as effective as it has been for funding mission work, it's 100 years old. I mean, next year, nationally 100 years old. There's certainly challenges to it and threats. What do you consider some of the greatest threats to our cooperative approach to funding ministry and missions?
Yeah. I think that's wise for us to look at. Any church needs to look at a SWOT analysis, any ministry, their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and certainly Cooperative Program has its threats. You know, if you look back just 15 years ago, in the last 15 years, we have 2,500 more Southern Baptist churches today than we had 15 years ago. We have those churches have received $1.2 billion more in receipts over the past 15 years than they did 15 years ago. Churches per church giving of churches that give to the Cooperative Program is up $1,700 per year over the last 15 years. But yet, nationally, we receive $80 million less in Cooperative Program giving than we did 15 years ago. So how does that make sense? We have more churches. The churches have greater offerings in the church. Per church average giving is up. How are we down $80 million, which is about 20% from where we were 15 years ago? And the reason is because we have 8,000 fewer churches who are giving to the Cooperative Program than we did 15 years ago.
8,000 fewer churches.
And so the issue is not as much churches are giving less, while that may be true. The issue is that fewer churches are giving. And there was a study done by Lifeway about a year ago this time where they looked at attitudes toward the Cooperative Program. And you see that waning from 2008 till now. This loss of trust in our greater denomination has led to a loss in desire to participate monetarily in that, was one of the correlations they made. So I think that's one. Understanding that any big organization like the Southern Baptist Convention, we're doing more ministry than any other organization in the world, I believe. Better ministry, stronger ministry, more fruitful ministry. But it is a big ship. Rather, it's not a big ship. It's a bunch of little ships. I heard Trevin Wax say it's like an armada of ships, and there's little ships and big ships, and we're all moving in the similar direction. Because of that, we don't dictate, and churches have their own right to choose. So I think there's that. I think there's this move to societal giving, where a lot of churches want to have control over directly where their money goes. You know, and I'll tell a church this. I just got back from a mission trip a few weeks ago in South America, and it was a wonderful place. Christianity can be spoken actively, lots of needy people. And I would think it would be a lot easier for a missionary to raise support there, an independent missionary, than one who maybe is serving with the Tajik people in Mongolia, people who don't have a Bible in their language, people who have 0.0001% Christians among them. And if a church is going to fund independent missions, they're going to want to support that missionary who's having fruit now. But what about the Tajik people? It's going to take that missionary 3 years to get to know them. It's going to take him 2 years to translate the Bible. It's going to take another 3 years to maybe to see his first convert. Does God want to see the Tajik people come to know Christ as Savior? Of course he does. And who's going to be there for those 8 to 10 years it takes to reach that unreached people group? Southern Baptist. That's who's going to be there. And we have the strategic focus that sometimes people want the quick, immediate result, but Cooperative Program is a long-term game.
And so, I mean, the way Cooperative Program works is by cooperation. Every recipient of CP dollars needs to steward those dollars well. They need to function with the highest level of integrity, accountability, trust. But sometimes something may happen, and a pastor may feel like he has a real concern with one of our CP-funded agencies or institutions. So talk to that pastor for a second, Michael. What do you say to that guy that says, I have a real concern about this SBC agency or institution? What can I do?
I would say three things. First of all, I would encourage that pastor to get all the information. There are plentiful YouTube videos and blogs of people saying things that may have various levels of truth to them. They may be entirely truthful. A pastor needs to lean in on that. At Kentucky Baptist Convention, we believe in transparency. Dr. Gray, your leadership has taught us that leadership moves at the speed of trust, and we build trust with churches. We disclose on our website the names of the trustees of our various SBC entities that represent you as Kentucky Baptist. And so, first of all, once you find the information, secondly, we think you should bring that to the attention of people who are in authority. If you're a pastor of a church, you don't want somebody to get upset and just leave and you never know anything about it. You want them to ask you a question. Hey, Pastor, did that really happen? And secondly, if it did really happen, well, Pastor, how can we fix that? You would want that among your church members. And so, one, gather more information. Number two, approach leaders. We make those trustees available on our KentuckyBaptist.org website. And third, I would say treat it the way you would want church members to treat your church. Would you want a church member who maybe is not thrilled about the music selection, or a church member that's not thrilled about how loud the youth group is on Wednesday night? Should they stop giving just because they're displeased with one aspect of ministry in the church? And I think every pastor watching this would say, no, we want them to continue to give. And if they have an issue with one little thing, it's not worth giving up on the whole. But unfortunately, sometimes churches do that. They may have an issue with one little entity or one little piece of our cooperative work, and that causes them to stop. And I just encourage them in this. You mentioned SBC entities directly. Who's really hurt when churches stop cooperative program giving is our Kentucky Baptist entities. Oneida Baptist Institute receives twice as much money as the Southern Baptist Convention Executive Committee. Clear Creek Baptist Bible College receives 5 times more money than Southwestern Seminary of cooperative program dollars. Sunrise receives 3 times more money than the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And so when a church pauses or decreases their cooperative program giving, they're hurting our beloved Kentucky Baptist ministries much more than they're hurting the national entities that they may truly have displeasure with.
Yeah. Michael, I appreciate that thoughtful answer. And pastors are in a tough spot. If they have a church member complaining about one of our SBC entities, it makes it difficult for them. But I have found our entity heads to be accessible. They know that they're accountable to the churches that fund their ministry. And as you've said, reaching out through their trustees, reaching out directly to the entity head, and we can assist with that. And we really want to help a church feel good about their CP giving. So if there's any angst at all, it's our desire to help them process that and hopefully get to a place where they're encouraged about their support.
That's great. Yeah. That's right.
So, Michael, part of your work involves helping us reconnect with some churches that have, for whatever reason, over the years, become disengaged from their state convention. One way that shows up is through they've been disengaged with CP giving. Some 20, 30, 40 years or more. Tell us about that part of your work and how you try to reconnect with those churches.
Dr. Gray, it was a great vision you had to seek to re-engage churches. As I mentioned before, the issue with cooperative program giving nationwide is we have 8,000 fewer churches giving now than were giving 15 years ago. And Kentucky's not immune to that. We may have it to a lesser degree than some other states, but we still have that. About a fourth of our churches have not given in 2 years or more. About 300 churches, so what would that be? An eighth of churches in the state have not given in a decade or more. And the vision that we have is we want every church to be a cooperative partner in ministry because, one, we think it's better for the church the cooperation is a good thing for the church. It's good not to be alone. It's good to have a cooperative nature to your ministry. And secondly, we feel like that their missions money can be used better in a cooperative manner than otherwise. And so for some of those churches, it's reintroducing ourselves to them. Some have not given in 20 or 30 or 40 years, and it's a brand new relationship. And so it's explaining, it's having a cup of coffee and helping them hear about the vision. For some others who may have made a recent decision, it may be addressing some issues like you've raised. A church member had complained about something nationally, and we want to help them as they process that through as a church. And so there's a great opportunity, we feel, in reengaging these churches. In the past about 2 years since we launched that initiative, we've seen over 60 churches reengage in cooperative program. Actually, now it's 92 churches reengage in cooperative program giving than were giving 2 years ago. And so we're very thankful for that. We think those churches are stronger, they're better because of that cooperation.
Yeah, Michael, so thankful for your leadership there, and in those churches. In many cases, it's just a matter of trying to reconnect that relationship and helping churches see the value of our cooperating together. God has so used Kentucky Baptist. I mean, it's been exciting to watch. If giving trends remain the same next year at our 100th anniversary of CP Giving, we'll pass $1 billion of giving from Kentucky Baptist
Praise
churches.
God.
That is absolutely incredible. Boyce Taylor never could have imagined that would happen, nor could any of those early Southern Baptists. Tell us about the CP anniversary. What's happening nationally? Anything that you'd want to share about that?
Yeah, it's a great day to be a Southern Baptist. We approach 100 years of the Cooperative Program funding our missions and ministry, and we're going to celebrate that next year. Just as your church may have a 100-year celebration to thank God for His faithfulness and look forward to the future, we hope Southern Baptists will have that opportunity in the upcoming year. And so, on the national scale, what's happening is in May of 2025, on the 100-year anniversary, the day of the anniversary in Memphis, on the same grounds, the same location. The building's not there, but the same location where the original Cooperative Program vote was held and passed there in Memphis at the Ellis Auditorium. There's going to be a committal service of sorts where we're going to celebrate what God's done in the past as Southern Baptists, and we'll have representatives from each of our states and each of our entities there. They'll sign a resolution to say that we still believe that this is the best way going forward, and a chance just to thank God for His faithfulness and pray for God's further faithfulness in that. There'll be lots of resources coming out in advance of the SBC annual meeting in June of 2025 to help churches think through that as well. Here in Kentucky, we are planning to celebrate that as well. Kentucky is the birthplace of the Cooperative Program. I say before that the best things in life come from Kentucky, and the Cooperative Program is one of those. We got fried chicken, L8, and Cooperative Program.
There you go.
And praise God for all three of those. And so we plan to celebrate that as well as our state convention as we look forward to this year's annual meeting in just a few short months away, as we have a chance to kind of launch into that victory year, and certainly a great celebration at the end of 2025.
And the theme for our 2024 annual meeting is Together for the Mission, and that theme will carry over into 2025. Tell us how that theme, Together for the Mission, how it connects with Cooperative Program.
Yeah. I mean, cooperation is togetherness. You know, you read in the first chapters of Genesis, God didn't make man to be alone. You know, He saw that he was alone and it was not good. And the same's true for a church. Being alone is not good for a church, we believe. And so rather we're to be together. And what brings us together is the mission. It's the gospel of Jesus. What brings us together is not our music style. And what brings us together is not the attire we preach in, and what brings us together is not an assortment of things that oftentimes we let divide us. But what brings us together is the mission, and that's reaching the world with the true gospel of Jesus Christ. And so I love that name. I love that emphasis, Together for the Mission. That's what we exist for.
Michael, every October is Cooperative Program Month in Kentucky. What are some resources that you could point a pastor or a church treasurer, deacons, church leaders to elders, for that matter, to help them think about celebrating or educating or promoting Cooperative Program in their own local ministry?
Our Kentucky Baptist Convention staff, our communications team, has put together an incredible lineup of resources that you can use. One, you can go to our website, kybaptist.org. Very easy at the top, you'll see Cooperative Program, and there you can find videos, Sunday school guides, all kinds of resources that you can use to help in your local church. We've got some things we can mail you completely free. We've got our Cooperative Program Fast Facts card. This will give you a list of some things that have happened over this past year, as well as how your distribution is made among our different entities. We've got a brochure called the Cooperative Program, the benefits, how the Cooperative Program benefits you, the church, and the kingdom. And just shares a little bit about here's the benefit your church gets out of the Cooperative Program. Here's the benefits your pastor gets out of the Cooperative Program. There's some very practical things that are part of that. We have these Cooperative Program Giving Impact Reports, where we can share with you where your money's going and the impact that it's having on the kingdom. You're making a large investment in the Cooperative Program, and we want you to celebrate the impact that that's having around the world. We've got thumb drives that have videos on them that we'd be glad to send you. These resources, glad to send you those in bulk to include in your church materials. Also, our staff is available to come train your church, speak to your church on the Cooperative Program. We've got a presentation called Better Together, celebrating and understanding the Cooperative Program. And we've got several staff who are equipped to give that presentation. It may be a great presentation for a Sunday night or a Wednesday night, or perhaps for a small group, maybe your missions committee or your deacons or your finance team, or your staff, a smaller group in the church can better understand and celebrate what's happening. My experience has been that most church members know the Cooperative Program is a good thing, but they have little familiarity with what all the Cooperative Program does. Yeah. And I think this is a great opportunity. You can invite one of our staff members to come into your church to lead you through this training time and walk away with a better appreciation for here's where our missions money is going and the way God's using our church really to reach the world.
Michael, someone has said that if the Cooperative Program didn't exist, then somebody ought to invent it, and we're grateful for it. We've seen the impact, how God's used that resource for the last 100 years. So, Michael, this podcast platform is called Leadership Lessons. Tell us about some influence on your life, a person, a book, something that happened, an experience that has impacted your view and understanding of leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, several things I could share there. I'm a big John Maxwell fan, so 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership was impactful on my life early on in my ministry. And just thinking about charting a course and the power of momentum and things like that have been helpful in my life. You know, some of the leadership I've learned has been from leadership gone wrong, serving with or around and just seeing, hey, you know, maybe there's a better way to do that, learning from that. The Lord has given me the opportunity to also serve with some incredible, godly, wonderful leaders who led by consensus, who led strongly, but did so in such a way that was unifying. I'm blessed to be at Kentucky Baptist Convention and learn from Dr. Gray's leadership here as he leads our state and our convention staff so well. So one, seeing it modeled by others, and two, John Maxwell has been a big help for me.
Michael, I'm grateful for you. Thank you for your ministry all across the state, in churches, spending time with pastors. Thank you for advancing the gospel in all the ways that you do and promoting the Cooperative Program. And thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite.
Thanks for listening to Leadership Lessons. An audio podcast of this program is available on both Apple and Android devices. The Kentucky Baptist Convention was created by churches, for churches, to help churches reach Kentucky and the world for Christ. For more information about the KBC and the Cooperative Program, which fuels our ministry, go to kybaptist.org. We'll see you next time on Leadership Lessons.